Good morning. I'm assuming and hoping that everybody can hear me clearly. Thank you for joining us on this Sage 200 Cloud Standard workshop. The slide says your microphones are muted, but actually we do want to hear from you and receive questions from you throughout the workshop, which, as the slide says, you can do through the conversation panel that you should be able to see and have access to. Please can I ask, if you're sending in, well, any messages or questions, please in the message box would you give your name. The workshop is being recorded. If you ask questions during the workshop, or indeed for the recording that comes later, your name will not be shared or given to anybody else. So that's just so we know who's sent a message into us. A few slides to go through to set the scene for today before we get into the software. We will send these slides to you after the workshop as well, so you don't need to write down anything from those. And quite importantly, at the end, for all of the software we're going to see today, I will talk to you about getting where you can straight away get a 1 month free trial, so you can use the software, have a play with it and assess it for yourselves. The information we send at the end will also then give you access if you wanted to copy of the recording and some other information that might be useful to you as well. I should introduce myself. So my name in the top right, I'm Barry Grimer from CentrePoint Software. We're part of the GCC group. So as I've said, today we're going to look at software called Sage 200 Cloud Standard, which is the online version of Sage 200. You can see 11 o'clock we're going to have a comfort break. We'll break for 10 minutes, stretch your legs and top up your coffees. When we come back, we'll have a very quick Q&A to cover off a couple of questions that might have come in the first session. So do remember to get those questions sent in to us, and then we'll go back into the software, see some quite good features then actually, and through to about well, it says 11:50, maybe quarter to 12. We'll go to final Q&A to finish for you at 12 o'clock. To set the scene of who we are, GCC Group, and you see that sort of makes up the three main entities for us. And most important thing there is left-hand side CentrePoint. So main offices in London and Gloucester, and certainly pertinent to today, top of the list, Sage 200 is our specialisation. Just want to talk a bit more about the GCC Group. So you get these slides and you can read more detail, but in fact there are 4 offices around the country, 50 staff, and the biggest number that stands out there, we're dealing with 15,000 support cases, over 15,000 support cases a year. That's not just for Sage 200, that includes IT, infrastructure. We're going to talk about the thing called Microsoft Azure, but Microsoft Azure cloud hosting is something we provide as well. And you can see there we're partnering with Sage, also Microsoft and others. The slide shows what we call our 5 pillars. These are important to us at GCC, our own business, and we know important to businesses and the users that we work with and support as well. I show these pillars to bring some focus to some key areas that we like to work with our users on. And in terms of this workshop, this session, we'll touch on a number of these key points. We'll talk things about reporting, flexible working with cloud. That's definitely something to talk about at the moment, of course. Security and support, both very important things as well. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail with you, don't worry. It shows the breadth and depth of what we provide as a group of companies. The most important thing, the thing to take away from this slide in relation to the Sage 200 that we'll be talking about, is that you need to know we provide everything you might possibly need to help you get going on that software, setting it up, going live, user training, ongoing support, absolutely everything. And after this session, also then starts with assessing the software with you to confirm it against your needs and requirements, and that's typically something that I would do with you. I've mentioned support a couple of times. It's a vital thing in any software to know that you're going to be looked after and that someone's actually going to help you get the most out of your software, to use it effectively, and something we like to say to ourselves, but in a real and proper way. And we all know what that means in terms of it's not just having it there, but it's got to work for you in the way that you want to work. Most important to us. You start to think about software, and this slide shows common, what we call them pain points that people might be experiencing in their existing software. Some will feel that you associate with all of these, maybe just some of them. Just picking on 5 points is a tricky one because every organisation have their own needs and requirements. And when I typically talk to people, usually the first thing I want to talk about is what are you struggling with in your software? So I hope when we look at Sage 200 today, we might actually pick on some of those. But there are, in the session time we've got for today, I'm only going to show a portion of the things that the Sage 200 software can do. So hopefully what we're going to do today is give you whet your appetite for Sage 200. But definitely the action, and I'll remind at the end, is anything your software isn't doing for you or you think could be improved, speak to us and then we can give some good advice. There's 2 quotations on this slide. We like this slide. We like these quotations. In terms of the top quotation, you can read there, Charles Darwin, not the strongest of the species or the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change, and certainly in current times and what's going to carry on with our businesses into, well, many months to come. I think that first quotation probably gives us something fairly important to be thinking about. And we're going to look at Sage 200. This is a Sage slide actually, and is a circle, as we can see, which gives broad areas of functionality within the software. And if we look at the red slice of that circle, we've got Sage 200 Cloud Standard and Sage 200 Cloud Professional. Today is all about the standard software, the online software. But for some of you, if you speak to me afterwards, you may actually be better going on up and thinking about the professional product. But today, all about the standard software. Reasons to consider. Again, as I said earlier, this is a tricky one because every person tends to have different needs and requirements. This is all, again, fairly summarised. In positioning Sage 200, and I'll mention Sage 50 a few times. Some of you on this workshop will be using Sage 50, and so that will be pertinent to know some of the differences. Sage 200 Cloud Standard is the next step up from Sage 50. There's nothing in between. Sage Professional then goes higher, and we can go higher still. So Sage 50 user, if there's things that you need slightly more than Sage 50 would provide, Sage 200 Cloud Standard would typically be the next place to assess. And we can see, looking at the slide, Cloud Standard is a lighter version of the professional product. It is quicker to set up, certainly got a very keen price point, and you can upgrade to the full product professional in the future if that's ever needed. Very important thing here about where it is. We talked about online, but so it says data, it's all coming from the cloud and it's all using something called Microsoft Azure. From a user point of view, in some ways that's nearly irrelevant because you don't see this thing called Azure. We'll go into Sage 200 Standard, you'll see I click an icon and I log into the software. So the Azure sits very far in the background, but it is also vitally important because you will want to know that you're using your software on what's considered the most stable and secure online platform. It is automatically backed up by Microsoft. So the bottom line is your accounting system are completely and utterly safe and secure. And indeed, you may be already trusting some of your business processes and systems onto the Microsoft Azure platform. Microsoft Azure is where all of the Office 365 software is managed from. So you may already be using it. And if you speak to your IT, mention Microsoft Azure, they will immediately say, perfect, fine, nothing to think about or worry about there. And that's something very important to know. Another good feature of this cloud standard software is that the software is always up to date. So it's just near towards the bottom, always up to date with latest features. So we take away a process that we might have with other software of going through upgrades, having to book them in and have engineers. Indeed, last week, Sage issued a new update to the software, Cloud Standard. It was rolled out automatically overnight. Users came the next morning, new features were just there. Didn't have to do anything at all. And indeed, quite a nice new feature. So one of those things I'm going to pick on towards the end. That's what I'm going to go in and be showing you. And all of this, as we say at the bottom, then we're supporting you on this software. So we're going to help you through everything when you're using it immediately and through into the future. Okay, so we'll move into get into looking at the software. So I've picked on a few things to go through with you, but I remind you it's really just to whet an appetite, give you an idea. And indeed, if you take the trial afterwards, what you may then find is you may want to look at the recording, because some of the things I show might give you some good ideas and pointers when you're looking at the software yourself. So I will close my slide set. Now I'm going to talk about 3 ways of accessing the software. So we've got different methods of using Cloud Standard and for different users, depending on what experience they want and depending on what they need to do. We have a full client, and then we've got these 2 clients, a browser inquiry client, and we're going to call them a web forms client, and I will show these. These will be after the break. Let's get into the full normal user for Sage 200 Cloud Standard. Now, this is the first session we've had like this, so I'm presenting out to you, and I'm also connecting over to this web software. So what we will do is we will be testing my TalkTalk router and see how good it is. Doing all this at the same time. So you can see I'm logging in. I use an email address and a password. It's all web. If we've got multiple companies, select the company I want to work with and click OK. Pop into the software fairly quick, so it looks like it's good. The messaging that we get popping up, Sage, if there's news, information, so messages might pop up. VAT, making tax digital, been quite a lot of messaging on that, and we've got more changes coming in April. CIS, reverse charge VAT, these things will pop up and give us access to information. And I did mention there's an update last week, 2020 R2, 16th of September. So as an existing user, I wake up in the morning and think, oh, what's new? What have I got in my software today I didn't have yesterday? So I'll close my pop-up message box, and this is my home page. Similarly with the right, I'll call this the right-hand panel, the information page. Again, links that Sage will provide, and there'll be news. Brexit coming back into the news again, as we can see there. But links to help you understand more about your business as well as using the Sage software. And you can change the home page to different things, but I've left it to the default, which is an information page from Sage. I'm going to start gently with you, and we will look at how we navigate and move around the software. And I think when people are looking at changing software, I think that's something they don't necessarily always think about. One might look at too much on paper and the features, and although that is important, if software isn't easy to use, it doesn't matter how complex your requirements might be, but it's got to be straightforward to use. If it's not straightforward to use, it tends not to be used effectively. So it's an important place to start. When you have your trial, when you're using Sage 200 Cloud Standard, it's exactly as I've got it here. This is my menu, modules on the left-hand side. It'll also be exactly the same. And I'm going to start by looking at customers. And let's have a customer list. Okay, we'll see these lists. I'll keep using these lists as we go through this presentation. We'll have lists of customers, suppliers, nominal codes, transactions. With these list views on the right-hand side, it's all about my working space. I might right-click, go to columns, and I can turn on or turn off columns as I wish, depending on what I'm interested in at this particular moment, or what I'm generally interested in. So I can create my own columns, doesn't affect anybody else. and I might drag and drop and move those columns around to suit how I like to look at my data. Information on customers, in this case, down as rows, and I can create filters if there's something I regularly want to hone in on, something I want to know about. So if I want to click my drop down, I've only created one, and I say I'd like to see my customers where the balance is over £10,000, and there we go. I have a filter. Immediately hone in on that data. The filter box, which is there. So to create that filter, I clicked new, I gave it a name, and you just refer to columns. It's so straightforward. Where the balance is greater than or equal to 10,000, and you can apply as many criteria to a filter as you want. If I click the tick box here to show public, that means that's filters available for other users when we're using it live. If I leave it unticked, it's just something that I can see. Let's take away my filter. For the columns I have on screen, I can search for anything I want to look for. I might search for John. Again, filters. So search has given me contact name for 4 companies. The main contact is John. Company at the top, John is part of the name of the company, Johnson. So searching across. So if we're on a transaction listing, I'm searching for an invoice number. Maybe it's not. I'm not finding it on the supplier account I'd expect to find it on. I can just search for that invoice number across the whole database. So very easy way to find data. We all know that sometimes it's customers or suppliers. Maybe where a colleague's created it, maybe we'd not need quite the account code that I would have chosen. So we just search across to find something we can't see readily on the list. Whatever I've got on screen, whether I filtered it, my columns, I've moved them around, we can right click, export, and send that entire list or a highlighted section out straight into Excel. Just opens Excel, drops it straight in. So if I want to do some analysis, I can send out an entire audit trail, just at a right click, straight into Excel. It's all formatted, sends out the column headings, and the right click export to Excel works not only on all the various lists we're going to talk about something called workspaces. It's exactly the same there, which is also an inquiry system. Screen inquiry, normal screen, position screens, anywhere that has a grid, anywhere where there's columns and rows in Sage 200, we can right click and export to Excel. One of the things you'll see me doing quite a bit is highlighting accounts on the list view. I could go through the menu for choosing something to enter transactions or inquiries, but we have a shortcut bar across the top. So I'll be doing a lot of things I'll do. I'll highlight something in the list and then just click a button at the top, which is I've got a pop-up there, which is a shortcut, and opens the screen. And in this case, I'm entering receipts for 2 customers. I've had 2 customer receipts in today, and the screen tells me I've got 1 of 2 selected, so I can enter my receipt, click next, and go on to the next one. I'm just moving my screen to the right because when I'm new to Sage, and if you log into your trial, your screens will actually look like this. And I'll leave this running for a little while. So for every screen we open, there is a help system on the right-hand side pertinent to the screen that we've opened. So this help on the right is asking me, what do I want help with? What can it give me more information about? I'll keep that open for the moment. So we can see the help you'll get when you log into a trial, then you can use these quick links to understand more about all of the screens. If this as an activity, if this was something I did, I regularly, one of my jobs is to enter receipts for customers. A little star. I'm going to click my star, and star is a favourite. And the stars are on every screen. Also in the top right in the background, you can see a star there for a list as well. If I close my screen, I talked about the menu. I think the menu is laid out in a fairly logical way: customers, suppliers, nominal, cash book, stock, and within those menus, we've got sub-menus for entering transactions, inquiries, running reports. We also have this is my star at the top. If I click my star, there's my screen for entering a customer receipt. The menus are all just one click, so you get no double click, just one click to open that screen. But what I might also do, if I had a few items that I regularly use, so I'm creating my own menu, you can then click this, I think it's a pen, but edit favorites it says. You can create folders, just move things around, move them up and down, and so you can just easily create your own menu of regular tasks, make life easy. It's all about, as I said, using the software in an easy, effective way. If I happen to be on the menu, and certainly when you have your trial and you're thinking where to do something, like we had on the list, we have a search menu item. So I will type and search. And what that tells me is it gives me all of the screens, all reports or inquiries in Sage 200 where the word journal appears. So it searches the entire menu system, and these are all where journal, the word journal is mentioned. I've got a report there, another report there, accrual journal entry. I can click and just run the item from here, or if I want to know where it is in the menu, I might right click, show in menu, and it takes me back to the menu to tell me where that would be found, and it would be found under nominal ledger, enter transactions, accrual journal entry, exactly where I would have expected to look for it, but interesting for you to know. We have a search there to help you navigate around the software. And hopefully what we've seen through that general navigation, it's fairly, users tend not to struggle very hard. You will test this yourself when you get your trial, move around, but use some of those features I've spoken about so you can understand what we're doing with the software. Okay, something a bit more in depth now. Personally, I would say the most common reason that people come onto Sage 200 from, let's call them smaller systems, that may be Sage 50 or another equivalent, reporting. And certainly we're going to look later on about just entering some transactions, getting data in. We talked about it needs to be easy, but really what's the holy grail? The holy grail is getting data out in an effective and timely way. And ideally, it's a conversation I have with many people, is without lots and lots and lots of manual intervention. Organizations have, most of us will have started with smaller software, entry-level software. Obviously that's the case. Your organization grows, the reporting, understanding what's going on in the business is more important to us, and it's probably more important now when things get a bit trickier. We want to be analysing that data much deeper to understand. We've got decisions to make, future plans to be thinking about. So I'm going to talk about reporting. Now, although reporting is the end result, we're going to talk about codes. We're going to start by talking about nominal codes. When we're setting up systems with people and helping to make sure you've got the right setup, you want to get the most out of your software. Start the conversation by what reports do we want out. Not everybody knows the answer to that, so we'll advise. Been working for so many organisations now, delivering these systems for 25 years. We know what directors like, what's going to help drive your business. We work back from the reports to the codes. So although we're going to talk codes, it's not about the codes, it's about the reports. I'm going to roll down to my settings menu and go to nominal ledger. So a lot of what the part really we're in now is about nominal ledger, setting up codes and reporting. One of the things we have in Sage 200, we can see on the list view, my data is not set up brilliantly, but it certainly gives as an example, we have a nominal code. We also have cost center and department. Code wise, we've got up to 8 characters in the nominal code itself, 3 characters cost center, 3 characters in the department, all alphanumeric. So full is 8, 3 and 3. I'm using 431. We've got department as a number. It could be letters as well. When we're setting up the nominal ledger, looking at the menu, create a list of cost centers. Very simple thing to create. It's a 3-character code, alphanumeric with a description. That's it. We can see I've got my help popping up, giving me help and advice about cost centers. So look at departments. It's exactly the same screen. Code, name. The right hand, on these columns on the right hand side, we're not really going to dip into this. I don't think we'll have time, but you can put email addresses. It was on the cost center, email addresses against cost centers departments. There are some budget reports I can run and then automatically email those reports out to budget holders relating to cost centres and departments. And that's why that contact email is part of the cost centre and department setup. When we create nominal codes, and I think I will create one because I think it best describes, but the cost centre and department are part of the nominal code. We see them as separate columns on this list and throughout the software, because if I was using 8, 3 and 3, that would be a 14-digit nominal code. If that was just one long string of characters, it would be quite hard to understand. So we break them into 3 parts visibly, but in one way to see this, it's a full code. This nominal code here is actually, I'm adding them up, is actually an 8-digit nominal code, 4000ADM4. Let's create a new account. I think that will describe. In terms of if we were creating an absolute one-off account, this is the screen I would use. There are imports for importing new accounts. There is also an account creation wizard. If I was creating, if we need a new cost center, I can go through the wizard, generate a new cost center based on existing cost centers. There's quite a few ways to create nominal accounts. It's just creating a one-off. And I'm going to say my code, my income code in my case, doesn't matter what it's going to be, is it's going to be for cost center for Newcastle and for my department 1. Those 3 parts, as I said on the other example I gave, make up the full nominal code. It's one name. I'm also going to choose a report category, and I'm going to describe that next because it's absolutely key to our reporting for designing and reporting profit and loss and balance sheet reports. There's a couple of settings here just to very quickly say. Nominal accounts can be either active or hidden. Sometimes we use a nominal account, we use it for some time, and then whatever happens in the organisation, we don't need it anymore. So we can just change the status to hidden, means it disappears from my list. It's in the background, it's still there, may still even have transactions on it, but we can stop new transactions going into it. It's still reported, so we can hide accounts away, and that's the same in all the different ledgers. And where we've got allow manual journals, where we would untick that if it's a control account, and that's talking about journals, age creditors, age debtors, we would untick that just to control and stop users entering to those transactions when they shouldn't be doing. The system should just use those accounts itself. So let's click save. So we've created a new nominal account, and I'm just hoping to show that the cost centers departments are a part of our system, and there we can see that on my list. So what we're showing here, I've got nominal code. It may look like we've got nominal code 4000 4 times, but remember, it's not just 4000. We've got 4000 NEW1, and the code 4000 doesn't appear, it isn't there against other cost centers. I had a longer list of cost centers. So what are the cost centers and departments? Are areas of our organisation that we want to run management reports for. My example here, Manchester, Newcastle, Birmingham, London, it may be a geographic area, doesn't need to be. It is simply, what do we want to run a P&L by? What are they? And that's what we would call a cost centre or a department. A department doesn't need to be an actual department. It may be a nature of trading, a type of customer, something we regularly want to run top level management reports for. I talked about the category code. I go a little bit deeper here than maybe we'll other places, but this is absolutely key. So the most important thing with Sage 200 is for you to know you will create your own setup and your own reports, not be driven by what the system wants to do for you. Very much setting up our own reporting here. Report category code is a very simple code. It's actually 4 digits alphanumeric. It has a net code and a name, and it is a very simple, its cleverness is its simplicity, very simple mechanism of giving the same code, if I want to a number of nominal accounts. So my accounts from 4000 to 4009 all link to category 101. It could be ABC, it could be XYZ. The actual code in itself has no meaning. It is just a way of associating nominal codes together. I could create nominal code 9846G and link it to category 101. So although for some reason I want it quite separate on my trial balance, I can associate it to these, all about the profit and loss and the balance sheet reports. Let's have a look at that. Reports appears on my menus in all of my modules. I've never counted them. There's probably, I'm guessing 150, maybe 200 reports, all sitting there straight away, waiting to be run. Because we have complete free form with our nominal codes, my income codes in the background there do begin with a 4. They may begin with letter I for income if I so chose. They may begin with the letter 7 if that's what I prefer. You literally can create the nominal code list as you want them to be, as you like to see them. To that end, then, we set up one of our P&L report. And if I edit, this is the design. As far as the rows go, category code I'm still talking about. For the profit and loss report I'm about to run. So hopefully if we see this, a little bit deep, but when I run the report, I hope you'll say, ah, I get it. So for my P&L report, I'll copy it onto this sheet. I'll do it once. When I get to row, when my report runs, it will get to row 3. Rather than being text, it will say, right, now I need a value. And we refer to the category code, that 101, which we've been talking about. So the report gets to this row 3, 101. It doesn't know what 101 means. It has no meaning, just a number. It now looks, as it runs the report, it looks for all nominal codes linked to this thing called 101, adds them all together. That's the value I get on my report. The wording against that, I can overtype, that's from that table, but you can call it for this report whatever I want to call it. It's a very simple thing. If I had created that nominal code, I can't remember what I called it, began with a 9 and had a G in it, I think, it would be on this row. If I want to create summarized reports, I want to create something for somebody else or for myself that's more of a summary level, I can choose a multiple group. And I'll say, well, actually, on this row, for this report, we'll have category 101 and 102 together on that row. I'm going to delete that row, save that report. It's as easy as that. Against each category, there may just be one nominal code. It doesn't need to be a group, but it may be a number of codes. I hope this is making some sense for us. When you have your trial, you can play with it and we will help you. What I'm hoping now is, if I run a report, it'll make some sense. When we run a report in Sage 200, we have a criteria screen. I suppose we'd expect that to choose ranges of or different settings to get different outputs. I'm going to mention the accounting period. It's the first question I'm being asked. And if you take note of this, because I'm going to come back and talk about this next after we've looked at report, Sage 200 is a period accounting system. So although my eye might then go over to the right hand side and look which month am I running it for, January, February, March, actually you're choosing a period number. So if I choose the top option there, period 1, we'll understand what that means in a moment. For the designs of rows, I only had 2 of them there. I can choose my, so profit loss is, so the design of rows for this report, that's what I'm choosing, the one we just saw. And we've talked about cost centers and departments. So these are a filter. So I might say run it for all cost centers, all departments. I'm going to run this report for the organization. But what if I want to run the report for this or for that, for this and the that's? Those will be my cost centers and departments. But if I choose, there are different options. I can choose is, that'll be my simplest. And I can say run me a profit and loss report where the cost center is Newcastle, NEW. I've only just created it, but run it for that. I've created it because I now want to run reports by it, and it's as easy as that. Obviously, I want to have some transactions in there first. I can leave the department set to all, or I might say, no, run it for Newcastle and where the department is sales. I might say I'd like to run a report for all of my cost centers, but for a given department. So these filters, these selections are complete mix and match. If I've got a budget holder, a manager, sales manager maybe in this case, and he's responsible for Manchester and Newcastle, maybe Scotland too, give him our northern region, then I can run it for those, being selective on those as well. And again, all departments or some. So setup of the cost centers, departments, and incorporating those in the nominal codes themselves makes my reporting incredibly easy. You just choose literally what do I want to run it by. I don't need to think any more about it. The budgets, we might come back to talk about budgets, but budgets are loaded against the full nominal code. So if I was to enter or upload a budget for my Newcastle codes, when I report and choose Newcastle, depending on the report, I'm just immediately going to get actuals, budget and variance. I just don't need to think any more about it. Let's have a look at my report. Now this report, I think is straightforward. I've pretty much been showing this profit and loss report for about over 20 years, I would guess. When I say over 20 years, the software we're looking at that I'm running live is, we know it's called Sage 200 Cloud Standard. Software Sage 200 as a product has actually been around in the world of Sage since 1988. In 1988, Sage released it called Sage Sovereign. It was then renamed to Line 100. Odd as it seems to say today, but that's before we had Windows. And then Microsoft came along and the world turned a little bit grayer in some ways from Sage Green. Software was renamed to MMS and eventually became called Sage 200. So what we're looking at here is online software, Sage 200, but with a pedigree going back to 1988. Should also actually mention, I keep saying, I have to keep reminding myself, Sage 200 Cloud Standard, that's a new name. Last week, 2 weeks ago, the software, if you looked before at this software, it used to be called Sage 200 Standard Online. So it's been a slight change. It's now called Sage 200 Cloud Standard. That's a recent name change. Back to my report. So what have I done? So even before we had the old DOS-based green product, I could do something very similar to this report. I probably should do more to it with all the time, especially with all the time I've had to do it. I've put a logo, I've put a box around some fields, but in Report Designer, you can move all of these headings around, change the headings, change the color, change the font, change the columns. So this is straightforward. Clearly, it's just for the period I ran for, which we're going to come back to, actual budget variance and year to date. There are other columns. We can have variance as a percentage. As time goes on, I would want to put comparing period this year to the same period last year, and what's the variance on that. Columns can be single or dual debit credit, whichever you prefer. A lot of design options in report designing. What I really want to focus on are the rows. So if I cast your mind back to when we looked at the thing called financial statements and I had my categories, what I hopefully remember now is, first thing is these headings are completely my own choice. The wording of them, the order of them, the way they've been laid out, that's completely my own choice. I had a category called 101. Its name was product sales. I could have changed that wording, and that we know that was that row 3 on that design. You can probably guess what I'm about to do. My question is to myself, how is this figure made up? I've got an actual figure here for product sales on period 1. So I'm going to click on product sales. And I suppose you're ahead of me because you know I'm going to drill into that figure. And if we just look a bit higher up, my original report's still there. What we've done is we've linked and we're running a new report now. We're running this report for the category that I clicked on. So that was the point. It's telling me about product sales, and it's run it for the same period of my original report. And the reason that's important is if I roll down to the bottom, the sum, this detail, the sum of this report tells me exactly how that figure's made up. That's my question to myself. What makes up that figure? Now, if I just roll back slightly, what we have in the groupings on this report are the nominal codes that make up that figure, and indeed the transactions under those nominal codes making up that figure. It's a transaction listing. Look at a couple of things on this report. We have a column here of, you know where I'm going with this, URN for us stands for unique reference number, and it is in effect our audit trail number. It's a system generated next consecutive number applied to every transaction entered into Sage 200, and that number is across all modules. If I enter something in the purchase ledger, that will then that will be the number on the purchase ledger, in the nominal ledger, and on the VAT transaction. So that's the consistent number all the way through. So on this account, I have a £240 credit entry, and I would like to see what was the full journal that was part of, the entry that was part of. So I click the URN number again. We're just opening new tabs along the top. The URN number, that's the full entry, my 240, and in this case, the other two nominal codes that were affected by that entry. If I go back to my listing, I've added a link, and I'll say, when I say I've added it, I'll explain that now. I think I'd like to see the invoice, so I'm raising my invoices within Sage 200, and I'd like to see what that looked like. The drill down, the reason I say I've added is drill down is a user-defined option in Report Designer. So you can create your own drill downs, and in theory, there needs to be a logic behind it. You can create your own drill downs on any column on any report. So I think this is a fairly logical set of drill downs from the P&L to the transactions, to the double entry, to show an invoice. That's an invoice. I haven't done much to my invoice layouts. Again, I've put 3 boxes around and put a logo, but when you're sending out invoices to customers, you probably do a bit more on the design. The point is, I'm running a P&L, asking myself questions and answering those questions immediately just by clicking and drilling straight through the report. If you don't want to have these drill downs or drill down to other reports, even those that you've created yourself, then you can. Let's close my profit and loss report. One final thing relating to the P&L, something I've mentioned when we ran it, the accounting periods. So just looking at time, I'm going to speed up slightly, but the accounting periods, we are an accounting period system, Sage 50 being date driven, not period driven. And in some ways there's a subtle difference, but certainly for some sites this is really important, and it is to me part of the reporting piece. So I have closed my accounting period for the month of August for period 8. Nothing can change those figures, and that's on the basis I've chosen to close off. I didn't have to choose to close off. I could have left it open. If I leave my whole year open without closing anything, it will operate pretty much in the same way as Sage 50. But for me, I'm issuing figures to management, to the board. Sometimes they might be a bit shocked to find that those figures might change if we didn't close off. So I'm going to close. They can't change. The figures I give to the board today would be the same figures as if we ran the same report in 3 months' time. In the real world scenario, what may well happen today, I receive 2 purchase invoices. One is dated September, the other is dated in August. When I enter a purchase invoice, I want to show that next. I'm going to give the transaction simply the date on the invoice. I don't need to think any more about it. September, yeah, I enter a September invoice dated the 10th of September. It's all about the nominal ledger. The transaction comes into the nominal ledger, uses this screen, this column. It's coming from the purchase ledger. September's an open month. That update process stamps it, gives it a period 9 transaction. It's classed as period 9. I now enter my August invoice. It's dated the 10th of August. I key in the 10th of August. When it comes into the nominal ledger says, right, I've got a transaction coming in from the purchase ledger. It's dated August. August is closed. August closed means I can never now issue period 8 against that transaction. The update process will issue the earliest period number it can, in this case period 9. So in the nominal ledger, remember when I ran my profit and loss report and I chose a period number, that's why it's important to think about the periods, because you're reporting, it will be included in my period 9 profit and loss report. And that's because we've chosen to close period 8. That was our choice to close it and block that from being used. Importantly, in the purchase ledger, on the suppliers, it's dated August. When I run an aged creditor report, it's aged in the right column, it is treated correctly, and I'm going to pay that invoice in a timely fashion. So everything's right in the different modules. It's not a disaster. We don't need to worry about this closing the periods. You do need a certain permission. I have a certain permission. And if I close a period, Maybe then I send my management reports out knowing that they can't be changed. And somebody comes back to me and says, oh, I'm not sure about this. It may well be a budget holder who says, hang on a minute, that doesn't look right. I don't remember spending that from my budget. I've already closed off. But as I've just done, I might reopen and I can read any of the modules. But in that scenario, I probably might, if it was material enough, I might think, yeah, actually, let's correct that. So I reopen August. I will enter some kind of journal correction, and then we're just changing a status, and then simply change it back and close the status back to closed. So not a disaster to close periods and then worry that we might have got something not quite right. Okay, so I've spent some time getting data out of the software. I think before we break at 11, it'd be nice to see how we get some data into the software. And something pretty much everybody will do. I mentioned it a few times anyway, is entering a purchase invoice. I'm going to show two screens actually. So again, I'm being slightly, I'm going to choose my supplier on my supplier list. And I'm just going to say rapid invoice. In this case though, because it's a batch, it doesn't pull through the supplier, but we'll see it on the next slide. So I've got my help. Maybe I think at this stage, I think I've got enough. I've got enough on going live help. So I'm going to just minimize that right hand side. So what we can see is when you have your trial, when you're using standard online, you can just open the help when you need it, keep it open if you want, or I'm going to shut it down now. I feel happy enough to carry on without it. This is a batch entry screen for my purchase invoices. I'll just, I should say, I'm hiding a couple of columns. You can use the button here to hide columns. I've hidden a due date and my exchange rate because I'm not thinking about currencies. But so the point being, when you hide a column, which you can just reopen again if you want to, make it even more rapid. So I'll be quick on this because I do want to show the full entry screen as well. Choose a supplier, there is a date, reference is typically for most going to be my, let's put some better numbers in, my invoice number. Second reference, just a text field, is 20 characters. And we have a nominal code. So I want to remind us, depending on what we're doing with our setup and our reporting, but my nominal code may be set up to tell me three things. So it's choosing the nature, in this case 5,000 as a nominal code, the nature of that as a cost code, and which cost center does it relate to, and which department. If I didn't need all of those levels, you don't need to use department. You can see in my list, some of my codes didn't have any cost centers departments, others might just have a cost center. There is a narrative box here where I can put description, not the rubbish I'm putting in, but some good description about this invoice. 6,000 characters can go in that box. Yeah, there's a good bit of text I can put in. We may or may not get time to. This is the one column that can be turned off in Sage 200. It's called transaction analysis, and it's for a bit more information. And a bit more of a drop down, a tag I can apply generally to cost transactions beyond the nominal code itself. Actually, one that I'd choose the top option, office move. If I was going to move office, I speak to lots of sites in London at the moment. There seems to be a lot of conversation going on about moving office. I'm going to have purchase invoices in. I may have costs through the cash book, maybe nominal journals. All of those items. I want to know when someone's going to ask me, what is it costing us? What did it cost us to do this thing? Whatever this is, office move, a redecoration, could be a promotional sort of marketing campaign, but I don't want to create nominal codes for it. It's something that starts and ends. I could if I want to create nominal codes, but I'm going to tag this cost as office move. Then later we can run some reports. When someone says, what did it cost us to move office? That's a report. £100. It's a goods value and VAT. Now it may be that in entering this purchase invoice, it wasn't a £100 invoice, it's a £200 invoice, but it goes to different nominal codes. And what Sage, certainly Sage 50 users will know, is there's something called F6. And F6 says copy the cell above. This is what I'm doing, moving across there. When the rows and when the cells underneath for the up to the second reference are exactly the same, then it's going to post as one invoice. But I can change the nominal code. I'll just be quick on it and put another £100 there. So you can carry on entering more rows for the same invoice. When it actually posts in the purchase on the supplier, it'll be one single invoice. but there'll be multiple analysis to the nominal codes. And then my next invoice down may be a completely different supplier, and I carry on. So grid entry for purchase invoices. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to show, or we might use them all, mix and match, but there is a couple of things here. The reason I'm showing the full screen, this is full single invoice entry. I've already chosen the supplier. In truth, I don't think it's much more long-winded because the fields are pretty much the same. Supplier, the invoice date, remember what we said about the invoice date earlier, that will dictate the accounting period it goes to. We have a reference, so my invoice number, I'll choose 123. I can click on here to check, is it a duplicate? For speed, I'm not going to bother. Second reference is a text box. I'm going to say it's a £100 invoice. Tax is worked out for me. I can change the tax value. I can change in this middle box the tax analysis. In the bottom section, like we saw on the last screen, I might say, well, it's actually not £100 to that. This is a default nominal code on the supplier, but I can change the narrative and enter a transaction analysis. Very similar to the grid entry screen. A couple of things extra here though. One is if we've got discounts, settlement discounts, or there's a number of boxes here we don't get in the rapid. That's maybe not used so much these days, but if we do need these boxes, we'll use the screen entry. But one key thing, rather than just save, which is what we did on the previous screen, I can click save and attach. And attach is where we're going to put onto this the invoice that we received or any other information I want. If we've got dual screens, I can drag and drop. As long as I can see the PDF somewhere, usually that's how they come in. Just drag and drop them. I'm not running a dual screen, so I'm going to say attach file, and to that end, then there's my invoice. I may have scanned it, so I'm attaching it, and I can give that a description there if I want to as well, and click save. There we go. Now let's see what that looks like in an inquiry screen. So, transaction inquiry screen on a supplier. If we were in customers, inquiring on a customer account, it's exactly the same screen, obviously it's just customers rather than suppliers. So the central grid, I said earlier, anywhere there's a grid, rows and columns, right click, export to Excel. Here's my invoice at the top. And the lower section on the screen is giving me more information about whichever row, doesn't matter the column, but whichever row we click on. I'm showing outstanding only. If I untick this box, couldn't have seen it. If I roll down, so I've got some invoices and payments here which are all fully paid, but my interest to myself generally when I come into the screen is I just want to see what's outstanding. So I can see part and fully outstanding, but I don't need to clog that grid up with items that have already been paid, but easy just to toggle to show those if we want. The lower part of the screen can be changed. I might think, well, I want to look at nominal codes. So remember in this grid, I'm clicking my invoice, so I can see the nominal codes that this transaction posted to. And I can simply move down to see the different nominal entries against each of those transactions. I can see allocations when we've got things at part fully paid, what was allocated against each other, how did it affect the VAT code there, did it affect a bank account, obviously mine's an invoice it won't have done, and I've got a memo entry too. So we've entered an invoice on the system, and then afterwards I think, no, I want to enter some note against this. It may be from me or from somebody else, and I can enter that note in this bottom box here, and I can enter multiple notes as well as time goes on. And what we can see is in the top section, the letter A appears under the column memo. So if I click on this row here, which already had a note on it, there's an A for an active flag, and it's not much use on that text there, but I entered that. You can see I entered that yesterday. A memo note can be toggled as active or inactive. So I might use this mechanism. So it's on the inquiry screen. I can enter a memo note. I can make it active or inactive, and that might be something I use when I'm coming to my period end, my month end. We might use it in connection with query. Something else we do on the transaction inquiry screen is after we've entered it, we can place a transaction under query. So you can see it's just a character, very straightforward mechanism. A character, letter X I've typed there, puts that invoice under query, which again I can run reports. What's under query? The memo note, I'm probably using them in conjunction with each other. We'll say why it's under query, who's it in query with. When the query is resolved, to take it off query, I can just take away the character, and then I might change my memo note to inactive, so it's there for historical purposes but not being used. When a transaction is under query, it cannot be paid. We'll talk about payment processing. You cannot pay it when it's under query. My invoice that I entered, I've got a paperclip there. We're all going to recognize what that means. It means there's an attachment. Maybe something comes along later. So even through the transaction inquiry screen, I can attach as many documents as I want. Obviously, I can double click and open it from here. So if I forget, as I often do, I'm entering an invoice and I'm rushing, I click save and thought, oh, I meant to attach it, but just go back into inquiry and then just attach it there. So it's nice to see some screens. And then the other fairly classic screen we might look at, just to show what it looks like, is a nominal ledger journal. And the journal is a journal, but actually maybe a few things going on here with our journal entry, interestingly. So being fairly quick, it's a journal, so we won't labour on it too much, but we can have template journals, which can either, we can preset the account, they can have values already or be zero. There can be a percentage type template where I put a figure in and it apportions across my nominal codes. A single entry, it can be a reversing entry. So I'm entering a journal and I want it on this date, but I want the opposite to automatically post on a different date. Maybe it's a quick accrual entry at a month end, so I can reverse it starting next month. It can be a recurring entry where I can say I want this journal to enter and I want another 11 on the same dates. Nominal codes, remind you, nominal code is with a cost center and department. If we're using it, we've got a big lump of narrative. I've got a transaction analysis code, and actually I will enter something very quickly because we might come back to look at something later. £10, £10, I won't do any more to it. And I can also save, post and attach. So I can post this journal and attach, again, if there's some backing information, some backing sheet, supporting information, attach that to the journal. We have attachments, number of places throughout Sage. When we do a VAT return, you can attach some supporting information that doesn't get filed, but it's there for your information. And a transaction listing I haven't showed yet. So these are my transactions. Again, we can right click and columns. It's my audit trail. I've got my URN to the left, sorted in descending order. If I roll over to the right, I can see who's been entering transactions, the module they entered them in, nominal ledger, purchase ledger. I've got the date of the transaction. Now I didn't change mine, but the posted date as well. So what have I done today? Or if I'm trying to, oh, I did that yesterday, where will I find it? I can look at the posted date, give me a date of the posting as well. So I flew through a little bit towards the end there, but what we're saying is getting some reports out, and that's a key thing for our software, always any software, and getting some data in. And my apologies, I rushed slightly towards the end. But if we're all ready, it is 11. It flew through for me, but it is 11 o'clock. So we will break for 10 minutes. We will come dead on 10 past 11. I will come back. It's just about 40 seconds past. So we've got 9 minutes and 15 seconds. But when we come back, I'll do a quick Q&A for you. So you might also use this break if you didn't have time to enter a question during the first session. Do fire some questions in now. I'll pick up a couple of them when we come back. We're going to see some quite exciting bit. I'm going to show you using Excel reporting is pretty much the first thing we'll look at, which I think is one of the absolute key features of standard online software. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back. 10 past, and as I said, we'll have a quick Q&A. Let's get rid of my slide and we'll go back to the software. And I'm assuming we have a thing at messaging, so I'm assuming I'm off mute and you can hear me. I think that's going to be the biggest, the phrase of 2020 is you're on mute, but hopefully I'm off and you can hear me. I'm very pleased to say I'm taking it as a good thing that we've had lots of questions in, so thank you for doing that. Obviously carry on as we go through this session on answering questions. What we'll do, actually, we've got such a good number. I know I certainly won't have time to cover them all at the end. I'd love to keep you for an extra half an hour, but I will let you go at 12. What we will do, I'll talk at the end about a follow-up and again about getting the free trial. But we'll let you get access and we'll put all of the questions and the answers that go with those, so you can see all the questions that everybody asked. Again, I will say very importantly, no names will be shared, all completely anonymous. But yeah, so do ask your questions, and then if we don't answer it at the end, you will get a response, and not only will you see answer to your own question, but other things that other people asked as well, which you might find of interest. A couple of ones which I thought were good questions to have asked, because they're things that I probably wouldn't have actually popped into anyway in the software. And first one, we were entering transactions at the end before we broke, and are there imports? Import record, there is an import on the menu, whether that's what prompted the question. So customer suppliers, and in fact, if I come to nominal, I'm thinking when we're setting up Sage, import cost center. So if you've got a small list of cost centers and departments, these things, Newcastle that I wanted to create, we can import those. It's quite an easy screen, as we sort of key them in anyway. The report categories, typically those are designed in Excel sheet and imported. Import assets, we can import fixed assets. Fixed assets, the records and the running depreciation is a subset of the nominal ledger, and nominal in this case, top option of import account file, where let's import the nominal account. So that nominal account, when we import those, that's a bit like the creation idea. That's the full thing put together of the code, the cost center and department with the name and some other settings. Import transactions, nominal transactions in this case, and budgets, definitely import budgets. So you don't key them in per nominal code for period. And when you're on this screen, I won't go right into it. We talked about the help. If you open help and click on create an import file, the help file will expand, and then from there you can get the templates, the Excel sheets and CSV files, the template. So it tells you how to use them, get the template, put your information in, and then use this import to import them in. So definitely use the help for those sorts of things. Really good. And it might just be worth a quick say that under import records, we've got export. That might seem a little strange, because I've already said everywhere you can right click and export anyway. What else would we export? Although I'm going to come on to Excel reporting, this is not that. The reason we have export records is for global changes. It may well be, what's an example on my customers, I'm using analysis code to assign my customer accounts to an account manager, maybe. That account manager leaves our organization. So what I need to do now is change all of my customers, excuse me, assigned to that analysis code to somebody new. It could be any other change. When I export the customer accounts, it will create an Excel sheet for me in exactly the style and format of an import. That's why we would use export. I mean, it may just be just to get the customer accounts out, but I can do that through other ways. But it's the format that's important in that case. And when I make those changes to that spreadsheet, save it and come back to import customer accounts, normally this import is used for creating new customer accounts. But if I tick update account if it exists, I can now take the exported sheet, which I've just changed the data on it, and now import that in, and it will make the changes to those customer accounts. So yes, we can import, answer to the question, and we also have an export. So we can not only import new records, transactions, we can import changes to accounts as well. And another really good question is about, well, actually the question's about access, but I'll answer it thinking access and security. So I'm under my settings menu. I go to organization and yeah, down towards the bottom, user access. And we use this for a couple of reasons, but let's talk security first. I've only got 2 users in my system. I'm myself, I'm going to, my colleague Anne-Marie is also there. Anne-Marie's, Anne-Marie, she's been organising this event. So if I click on myself, and we can see I've got a tick box there, I'm an administrator. I get access to everything. Whereas Anne-Marie is not an administrator. So what we see against Anne-Marie and any other users that we've got set up is we're sort of looking at the menus. So nominal ledger, maybe Anne-Marie shouldn't even have access to anything in the nominal ledger. We just untick. In Anne-Marie's menu, that whole module now disappears from her menu. If there are things within the nominal ledger that she should or shouldn't have access to, you can carry on expanding down and just click, just by clicking, turn off or turn on things. So Anne-Marie gets a 1, so she can't have access to things that she shouldn't have access to. It may also be just a means of tidying up the menu, just things that we don't need to use. They don't need to be there on the menu. If there's certain reports we just never run, just untick them, clean up the menu. We know we can create favorites, but just to tidy up as well. So we might use it for that. So is there security access? Yes, there is. And that's, you can see that's a pretty easy thing to set up. Okay, so I promised the excitement of Excel reporting, and to me, this is one of my favourite things about the Sage 200. The profit and loss, I didn't point it out. The profit and loss I ran earlier, it was on screen. The drill down is fantastic, there's no doubt. I could have saved that and dropped that out to an Excel sheet from there. I didn't point that out at the time. Different reports, you can send the report as a style out to Excel. Some reports do, there's the data tab, and if it's more of a listing report, you can drop the data tables into an Excel sheet and work with those. You can save them as PDFs and all sorts of things. But this is not that, this is literally using Excel sheets. In Excel reports, this is my list, and this is when you use your trial, it's exactly the same list you'll have. These are all defaults out of the box, and they end in XLSX. These are Excel sheets sitting within Sage 200. I used the terminology before, and I'm definitely going to use it here. Its simplicity is its beauty. Reports have still got to be simple. I think, and what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to quite some detail. I'll do it fairly quickly, but what I really want you to do is, if you have your trial, you can then get the recording of this and play it back if you need to. You probably know more about these Excel sheets than even I know, which will make sense in a moment. But you can play this back and then and I'll do some things. Normally I would do more for the time. So we're going to talk about revenue and cost report as a default, profit and loss. But before I do that, like I mentioned in the reports, there's lots of listings here, nominal transactions, those can just be run. But we do need to help Excel reporting know how I want my P&L to be run, just like we did in the nominal ledger before. And in this case, under Excel reporting, we have financial statement designer. This is really easy to use. And in truth, if we just get it wrong, you just start again. I mean, it's minutes. And we have as many layouts as you want. So you can have all different designs. And it's all about the rows again. The balance sheet, I have not set my balance sheet yet. And it starts looking like this. So we're always talking about categories. My categories are on the left-hand side. My profit and loss, which is the one I'm going to run, I have set up. And we talked about using the help files, and the help files again are good, so you'll use them, but this is probably some good hints and tips too. The first on the right-hand side, because this is my actual design, the first thing we do is add a group, and a group is just a heading. I've got 4 of them. Add all of the groups first. So add a group sales. I've added one called purchasers. You can call it whatever you want. It is just a text heading, no more. When you've got all of the groups added, and you can have subgroups. So you can click on sales, add another group and go further down in a hierarchy, if that's what you want. I've got sales. Now what I would do, highlight sales, and on the left-hand side, select those categories and just add them to the group in the order I want to see them on the report. So those are my do you remember product sales? That was my category 101. Add those to the right hand side. It's as easy as that. Even if I got it all wrong, you can move things around, but starting again doing that, it is 8 minutes to do. That's the one thing we have to do, just for profit and loss and balance sheet reports, and create different designs if we want as well. So we have to do that. So for revenue and cost reporting, now I'm going to speed up slightly because I was a little bit slow in the first session. Normally, click update, click on the report, click update, and I'll explain a bit more about that. Give it probably 30 seconds. You'll get a message, a pop-up message in the right hand side that it's been updated. So that's refreshing the data, and you can see in the columns here it tells me when it was last refreshed and who did it. If I don't want to refresh it, if I actually want to run it how it was run last time anyway, obviously I wouldn't refresh. We're going to click view at the top and open. This is exactly how yours will come up. Follow me through. And this is quite a detailed thing, so I won't go too slowly, but I want you to get the most out of this in your trial. I have an introduction tab. Immediately I'm going to delete that because I don't want that going forwards. That's not part of my report. What do we have here? We have a pivot table, and these reports straight out of Sage are pivot tables. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got to do a little bit of tidying up. It's not much, as we're going to see. Our consultants and trainers, they're pivot table experts. The truth, although I show Sage, I'm not the expert, but I can get through with what I'm going to show you now. When I created those group headings, you can have multiple hierarchies here, and the default on this pivot table is that maybe someone just going to untick group 4, 3 and 2 because I had one level of groups. That's immediately tidied up. Now I've got my categories. That's my grouping level 1, so that's pretty good. I'm going to look at the field list now. It's all pivot table stuff, so some of you will without a doubt be using pivot tables, and this all seems very basic to you. For me, if I can find it, period number, there we go. So I'm going to, because it's quite important for me anyway, I'm going to grab the period number and I'm going to drag it to the top of the columns. So I want to show the period number, so we're showing it there. And then I just want to do a little bit of setup, so I don't want a subtotaling. I don't need that. Click OK. So I'm tidying up my report. In the rows, I've got a group. It's sort of like a gap there. So I'm just doing a bit of cosmetic formatting here, and we'll say insert a blank line, click OK. I think that's looking a lot better for me. I'm going to leave my columns saying period and year to date, carrying on, but there are columns here. We've got budget columns and all sorts, so you would add those either for this report or other reports we may create. Let's close that. So what Sage has done, it automatically dropped out slices for me where we can slice. So I only had one of those layouts, some of the layout we did with the rows, but you can have multiples of there. I can slice, filter on the departments, on the cost centers. Should click my year. Let's show something is relevant. So there we go. Now we're looking better. So period 1, 2, 3, 2020, period, year to date. Those are my categories. If I roll down, I haven't got a total yet. Right. So final thing I'm going to do. Pivot table options, grand total on the columns, click OK. There we go, looking better. This is a default style, and it's looking a bit dark there. I can't quite see what that is, so I'm going to go to design. Let's choose a different design. That looks a lot brighter, that one there. There we go, that's looking a lot better. So now I can really see what's going on. Easy as that. So quite an important thing here though. I don't want to be doing that every time, obviously. So what I will do now is I'll save this as a spreadsheet, as a normal spreadsheet. Don't you think any more about it. Back in Sage, I'm going to click upload, and I'm going to choose the Excel sheet that I want to upload, and it will simply drop it back onto this list. One thing I will need to check actually, in the trial, the 1 month trial, I haven't actually checked whether you can upload your own, but in live system, you absolutely can. I have loads of them in my live system. Not this system, this is a test system, but in the live system. So you do only do them once. You'll see the upload, you'll certainly see the upload button, and you will know that all those things you can create once and upload them. And then we might think, but how does that work? How does Sage know all those things I've done? Because you can do anything you want in that pivot table. You will, this is just Excel. You will change the name, the title, you will delete some of these slices if we don't need them. You can use normal Excel to add more slices if you do. You've got your columns, you might put text, you might put charts, all sorts of things you're going to do on these sheets. If I'm creating different versions of this P&L, I've got period, may want another one with budgets, I may want another one, put the years side by side, you can do that. I could do it two ways. I could either save this and then create a new sheet, so it's a different report in Sage, or I'm going to click add a new tab, so it adds a blank tab. I'm going to highlight the whole thing, copy, go into the new blank tab, paste, and then do the changes there. So I've got now, and then that's an easy way, and I'm going to work across and have all different tabs, all showing different bits of information. And it's as easy as that. Key thing, every report has a data tab. When I click the update button, we select it and click update, all Sage does, the important thing it does is it updates this tab with the raw data. And in this case, being profit and loss, we've got nominal accounts and the categories and the periods and the years and the monthly movements. It's there, so it just refreshes that data and updates it. If it was a transaction listing, all the transactions will be there in a raw format, and the pivot tables then, because they're linked onto that data, just refresh. So Sage, all Sage does, update that one tab. Anything you've done is just immediately updated. So very simple, wonderful in how easy it is to use. One other great thing with this, I can save this sheet and I can send it to somebody. I email it to somebody, and the data is included in that spreadsheet. It's there. So when they receive it, this is exactly what they receive. So they can do things like this. They can click on the slicer. I haven't got any data there, but they can click on the slicer options. They can click on the cost center. What was that? So I haven't got much data, but they can do all of this themselves. They don't need to be live connected. They can play with it, click on it, do all sorts of things. So you will create your own sheets. It's a one-off thing, but it's always there for you to create new ones, and you can upload them back into Sage. Just quickly show one more. So when we're looking at profit and loss, you look for the thing called revenue and cost reporting. When you upload it, you may well call it profit and loss and call it whatever you want. Nominal account balances. Again, I'm just going to view, click open. And in my life system, I play about this only slightly because it's a trial balance. And again, we can click on year. And as I roll down, it's a TB straight in Excel. I mean, it's as easy as that. And in this case, they have put a second tab. And when you're on other sheets, you'll find that sometimes there's 3 or 4 tabs with different versions. So in this one, we've got a budget. So it's a trial balance with budget versus actual in this case. And more slices going on. In this case, you can slice on the category. You can have those yourself, report type, all sorts of things. So you're analysing, reporting, all directly in an Excel sheet. One absolutely key thing, it may not be immediately obvious, but my word, for things we've used in the past, it's simply a file of a type XLSX. It's compatible with any I was going to say any version of Excel. It's compatible with any and every version of any spreadsheet package, as long as that spreadsheet package will recognise XLSX. Now, Sage only tests things with Microsoft Excel, and that typically is what we're using. But what we've had in the past, and we no longer have to think about, is when Microsoft release a new version of Excel, as long as it recognises the format XLSX and they don't change that, we're good to go. So I don't need to be constantly thinking about, is my account software, can we upgrade to Office, whatever the new version is it going to impact my Sage? No, it isn't, because it is just opening an XLSX and using your default program to open that. So it's pretty future-proofed as well, and that's what we want. If I look down towards the bottom, just above Excel reporting, something called Workspaces, and Workspaces is an inquiry system that we get within Sage 200, different to the, let's call them the traditional inquiry screen. So what I did before I opened a supplier transaction inquiry, we saw fairly straightforward information, list of transactions, and then I chose the nominal. I'm going to just roll my menu over to the left to make this a larger screen. This is just mix and match. Some users prefer this. Me, I swap between the two depending on what it is I want to look at. All by the modules. The one we talked about a purchase ledger inquiry before, so I'm going to go to purchase ledger and I'm going to click payment control. just to show what these workspaces are like. And it's in this case, it's a 3-panel, what we call 3 panels, top and bottom for the left and right hand side as well. Sometimes there are 3 panels where the third goes underneath, so each one's slightly different. Suppliers in my top left, and that's pretty much like the list that we saw, supplier list. Even on these, right click column selector. I can add, take away columns, I can move columns up and down, so I can change it as easy as that to see what I want to see. You may have noticed something else. There's an action selector. So I can select an action. An action selector is, first of all, what do we want to see across the top as far as options go? And also a default. And the default action is when I double click, what do you do? So in this case, I've chosen when I double click, I want to open the screen amend account details, and it'll open the amend account details for that account that we've got highlighted. So that's quite neat. We roll down a bit. What's going on underneath is these are the outstanding transactions. So I can click my suppliers, and without opening and closing screens, I can just immediately roll down and see the outstanding. So it's more dynamic. The other thing with the transaction listing, I can also right click, choose my columns, choose an action. So I actually get a designer on the list view. We said we could change it, but when we open those traditional screens, they're sort of coded. They, the order of the columns. Because the other thing I can do here is I can export to Excel. So I can move those columns around very easily. And then when I export them to Excel, if that's something I do regularly, they're already in the right order for me. So a bit of a designing screen go on here. Let me talk about the right hand side. If I've just clicked on a supplier, and the right hand side says to me, I will tell you what I can about the supplier. And there's a little drop down arrows there. So if I click the drop downs, it says, so supplier detail, but I can choose to look at any of this other bits of information. Memos in this case are the memo notes on the supplier record. But if my last click is on a transaction, the right hand side will say, oh, I'll tell you what I can about the transaction. A bit like we saw in the transaction inquiry, but I'm getting headline information, and then I can change what we see. I can look at the exactly as we did before, but I can look at the nominal transactions, the memos, and then by clicking and moving around. So whole information, but just more dynamic. Some people will prefer that. And certainly if I'm looking at things and comparing different accounts, that might be a great way, excuse me, to move around and inquire on my data. And we saw that those are all for all modules. When we're in the modules, you get more if we go through the option called workspaces. But when you're using your Sage, if we go to supply inquiries, where we've got these square icons, those are like those traditional screens, but these circular icons, these are workspaces. So the workspaces are under the inquiry screens, but there are more available under the option just called workspaces. Now, what I want to do, there's kind of a reason I got to that point, because I've talked about going in and a full client. We've always had for standard online a second way that users can use or interact with this web, this cloud software. And I'm going to double click this icon. Now, the important difference here is the full client runs, although I click it, it's connecting me to the internet. It's not through a browser, but this one is through a browser. Sage might call this a connected user. Or a self-service user. I'm going to call it a browser inquiry user. To get into it, exactly the same as I did before. It's my email address and my password. I get to choose a company. The important thing is I'm going through a browser, whether that's I keep saying Internet Explorer, but Edge as we moved on to now, or Google Chrome. If I'm on the network, it just works straight away. All I need is the link, the URL there, but it's browser based. So I've got a pop-up bar at the top, and I don't know how to get rid of it. I'm nervous of clicking anything but purchase ledger, payment control. I'll swap and see if we can get rid of it. Yeah, I can't stop it. Okay, sorry, I'll leave that there. Payment control. It's the same thing. It's workspaces. That's why I show workspaces. So workspaces is part of the software, but if I want to just access, if I'm an inquiry user, I want to look at data. You want to give me access, or I would like to see data. It may relate to, in this case, it's suppliers, just showing it's the same thing. I can even go to the column selector and move my columns around. It's dynamic. The action selector is only within the main software, but I'm in the office and I'm connecting through a browser straight through the network, but I could be away from the office. I could be, so I'm connecting through a browser. Where it's really key, where most of our users do use this, is they're out on the road. Maybe I'm going to visit a customer. I think through my tablet that I'm sitting with me, I might want to think, well, I'm going to visit a customer. Let me look at the customer account. Do they owe us any money? Do they is there any credit control notes I need to be aware of? I'm with the customer. What have we got? These are live. What have I got in stock? So I can see my stock levels. I might look at sales orders. Has this customer got any outstanding sales orders we haven't yet delivered? Maybe they would say to me, oh, that thing I ordered last time. I can't remember which one, but I can look. I can inquire on their account. It's a complete inquiry system available to me without being a full Sage user. So I'm not entering data. It's inquiries. As well as the workspaces, we have Excel reporting. So I don't need to go through this because we saw this, but they are all there, XLSX. So my Excel reports, depending on what I'm given access to, I can run these Excel outputs into Excel to do some analysis. Maybe I'm a finance director. Yep, TB, P&L, quite keen on getting those. I can even then create my own. We've got the upload option. I can create my own reports to put them back in, even through the browser system. Now I'll touch on this just very slightly. I said it is all about inquiries. It is, that's kind of the main point of this. But there is a couple of things that's come into this software over time. I can enter a purchase requisition. Have I got any? Purchase order authorization. And indeed, there is a purchase order sitting there waiting for me to authorize it. It's one I entered myself, admittedly, so I am my own authorizer, but I might double click. There's my purchase order, and if I double click further, I can see the lines. So what was I ordering? Oh, it was 1,000 widgets I was ordering for myself. So I might pop back to the top level and I might authorize. If I highlight that row, and I can click authorize if I want to, or I could query it so I can authorize. So, but generally it's all about inquiries. I can even run some reports through this browser mechanism. So it might be purchase ledger, it might be an age creditors. Criteria, submit, and in this case, because we're in a browser mechanism, the report will run as technically as a PDF, but there we go, that's a landscape style of my age creditor report. So inquiry and reporting system, now we've had that for quite some time, that's not a new thing, but it gives me a good way, different way of accessing Sage 200. I'm going to talk about a third way. So 16th, if you were eagle-eyed sharp at the beginning, you saw we had an update to Standard Online on the 16th, which was rolled out to all users. And it's introducing a third way, and it's just free, it's just given straight to the user. So existing users got this when they came in, no extra cost to them. Admittedly, this is a start of what will be, I think, quite an exciting progression to the software. So I'm logging in, I'm choosing my company. And this is sort of what this will progress to. I mean, what I'm showing here is now is available and users using it today. It's really just a different way, but for a full client in this case. So maybe for inquiries, but also now really talking more about entering data through a pure browser. So it's just a second option. You, as a user, you can choose whichever suits you best. As you can see, I'm flipping between them anyway. If I expand my menu, now some of this is just similar to what we can do in Sage, but I'm going to pick on one particular thing. We haven't talked much about stock, and don't worry, I'm not going to go deep into stock, but enter transactions, adjustments, and I'm going to talk about a stock take. So this may just take a moment to refresh. So I've got a warehouse, and I've got a stock take. And there we are. Now, just to show why I'm showing this, back in normal Sage. So of an evening, I want to do a stock take in the warehouse. In this Sage, I'll probably have a PC in the warehouse. But what we would normally do traditionally is you would set up a stock take. If I go to my print queue, so I printed, when we set up a stock take, you can tell it to print a stock take sheet. And it might be that I give to somebody in the warehouse, I say, here's your stock take sheet. When we print these sheets, you can say either print the expected levels or not. So he takes this piece of paper and off he goes around the warehouse and he's writing all the actual values. He's going to come back to his PC and there is a screen where you key those in. And the reason I like this, because you can absolutely guess, because this is pure browser based, now he's got an iPad and he's going to take this iPad off and he's going to toddle around the warehouse and he's going to key these figures in literally while he's there, and this is live on Sage 200. So he's going to enter those stock take figures while he's out and about, doesn't need a piece of paper, and when he gets back to his table desk, the job's done. So web forms, third way of using the Sage 200. The menu as time goes along will expand, it's going to go on to more and more options, and what we've already said is those options are immediately rolled out to users when they're released. So I don't need to do anything technically, and I don't need to pay for engineers to be upgrading me. They are there. Okay. Time flies by quicker than I ran through twice on this, and I'm hoping I'm not talking too slowly for you. So what I want to do really now is, because I want to get over to some Q&A, and yeah, so again, use this opportunity to get some questions in, but to shout out some features. Purchase, and there are lots more than I'm going to, so come back to us and ask afterwards. Purchase ledger. I say shout out, but I'll quickly show things as I'm talking. Restricting access. There is a the user access, that screen that I showed earlier. There is a tick box there to show which users can or cannot amend or enter supplier bank details. I can enter supplier bank details, but for users who should not be doing such a thing, you just untick a box. They don't see that tab, so amending, they can't change it. If a user does have access to change the supplier, and I'd have done this if I got time, there is an audit log. I'd like to view the audit log. So I have access to change supplier bank details. I've only changed one, but before we go on to payment processing, I can see who changed it, what did they do, on which account, what did they change it from. In my case, the field was blank, so it's nothing, but I entered the value. If you change it from something to something else, it's all recorded. So you have a full log of everyone who's changed supplier bank details or entered them on new accounts. That hardly needs me to explain why that's a good feature. That links in then with, excuse me, purchase ledger payment processing. I'll be quick on this, but when we're paying domestic suppliers, typically we'd use this list. We generate, or you simply create using the amend option, your own list. You tick, you select supplier invoices that are ready, due to be paid. I vaguely mentioned it earlier, there is a due date, so you can say create me everything that's due. It gives me a list of suppliers, whether I've created my list or generated them. And when we click, you understand how these workspaces work now, click a supplier, immediately says these are the invoices we're due to be paid. But I can go back to amend and I can change that. I say, no, I don't want to pay that. I want to part pay it. Actually, I want to pay something that's not quite due yet. I create my list. When I'm ready, I'm going to click generate payments. Depending on settings, or settings in the background, but my settings would be generate payments for the suppliers, create the electronic file that I'm going to send to the bank. It does that automatically. I'm going to say email my remittances out directly. They go without me doing anything, and it updates all those payments onto the supplier accounts. It allocates them against invoices and credit notes and everything, The whole job's done for me. I don't do anything other than select what I want to pay and then just go through the steps. Obviously, the final thing I do, Sage will create the file for the bank. I have got to log on. I log on to my bank, shoot that file up to the bank for them to process the payments. Really straightforward. Stock control, talking more here now, differences to Sage 50. In stock control, multiple locations. So we have stock items here, locations, and so stock can be stored in different locations, and you'll see the stock levels in each of those locations. There are 2 levels. My terminology set warehouses, so the primary location, and we can have bin locations if we're using them as well. We can see a column on the right. I'm speeding up. We can see on, I want to get some Q&As in. We can see on the right hand side that my items here are non-traceable, but traceable for us means serial numbers and batch number traceability. So we can have serial and batch number. If we're using batch, that can be used by dates, sell by dates, other information, all sorts of things, lots of analysis fields. Price book is our price lists for stock items, and one of the things we can have in a price book, we have multiple price lists which you link the customers to, so they get their own price list, and there's discount matrices, all sorts of things, but also time limited price lists. So I don't want to mention that word beginning with a C, but in 3 months we've got a time coming up. Maybe I'm doing some promotional offers, so I can create a price list, say applies between this date range and times on that date range. And then when people are entering, if we're entering sales orders, Sage will offer the right price for that customer. But I don't need to then undo that price list when it expires, when it goes past its end date. The customer is immediately reverted back to their normal price list. We have some multi-currency improvements. Again, I'm comparing to Sage 50. We have period exchange rates, and actually a period isn't slightly misworded, I think. It's not linked to the accounting period. It's basically a date range. So a period might typically be a month, but you can enter the period exchange rates for a month. You can even enter daily exchange rates. The example I gave of my purchase invoice, when I enter my September invoice, it's nothing to do with the period control, but it'll use the September exchange rate. And when I enter my August invoice, it will use the August rate without me thinking about it. You can override them at entry, but that'll be my default. Sage 200, we can revalue on the customers, on the suppliers, on the bank accounts. When we revalue on customers and suppliers, you see that drill down option. When we're on currency accounts, will show the full revaluation history on every single transaction. Click a transaction, it'll give you all the revaluations, whether we ran at period end, and then the final revaluation on full payment. So all is shown there. Order processing, sales orders, purchase order processing, part of the standard online as standard. You're going to get those. Whether you use them, you can raise purchase orders. Sales orders is the opposite way with customers, and there can be, certainly if we're using stock, there can be acknowledgements, picking lists, dispatch notes, all sorts of things. There's an invoicing module for more straightforward invoicing, but because you get sales orders, its full name would be sales orders stroke advanced invoicing. There are some further options. So in fact, you can go into sales order processing and turn off, I don't want acknowledgements, I don't even use stock, no picking lists, but I want to use the more advanced features. So 2 invoicing mechanisms that we might use. We don't even need to be processing something we'd call a sales order, but it can give me some options. Into the final thing before I get onto some Q&As. What do we integrate with? We integrate, these are Sage things, so existing Sage users will already know these things, but we integrate with Sage Pay, now called Apeo. We can integrate with other payment providers, that's because of receiving payments, and we've got Stripe, PayPal, and Go Cardless, but Sage Pay are key one, so we integrate with that. Payment gateway is something where we're making, so I said when we're using our payment processing for domestic payments, but if I'm paying suppliers in the US, I need a slightly different mechanism, and there is something called a payment gateway, which is actually an e-wallet. I'd call it an online bank account, but Sage can actually manage your money, make the transfer for you, and deal with the conversions. So that's good for paying foreign currency suppliers if we've got enough to warrant that. Bank feeds, Sage 250 has this as well, but there is a link directly from a bank account in the cash book through directly into your bank, where we can download transactions straight from the bank, straight into Sage. We're not going through anything in the middle, and for purposes of bank reconciliation, depending on who your bank is and formatting, and that's all been messed about with the banks in March, but there is even something called bank feed rules that we can use to import certain data from the bank. Finally, many Sage 50 users, it's the biggest payroll package used in the UK, will be using Sage Payroll. Sage 50 integrates with Sage Payroll, so if you've got Sage 50, you may already be integrating it. So does Sage 200. If you're using Sage Payroll, you don't need to change the payroll. You just go into nominal link settings, change your link to Sage 200. If you're using a different set of nominal codes, you may then look at the pay elements and other things to update the nominal code, but that is all it will need. It integrates in a similar way. Phew, 11:50. So my apologies for picking up, but hopefully that rush has livened you up a bit anyway, but I did want to get those things in. Now I'll leave Sage home because I may come back to it, but already I'm into a final Q&A, and I did some of it. In truth, most of these are from the early session because I've rushed that last bit. I've not quite had a chance to look back at what came in the second part, so my apologies. But I'll remind you that I will send it. You will get answers to your questions, even if not here. So let's see what I can get through before we go on to just the last 2 or 3 minutes, but I'll tell you about the free trial and things. There is a question, I suppose this did come from the beginning, obviously, is about difference to professional. I would always start with looking at standard online, especially for the people on this session, unless you think, actually, I do definitely need more, and speak to us. Project accounting, that is a part of the professional product, so an extra module, and that includes functionality for web timesheets and expenses, but project accounting. Stock control, I've mentioned slightly. Bill of materials. There's light bill of materials in the standard product. We get a whole module, not manufacturing, but we're moving in that direction where we're putting items together for selling final items. One thing Sage have done fantastically right from the early 90s is they've allowed third-party systems, it has to be done properly, there's a toolkit to integrate with Sage. And integrations are easy when Sage is installed on your server, because those things can obviously reach in and use Sage and extract data. It's all very straightforward. As there is with Sage 50, even more for Sage 200, there is a massive list of third-party programs that interact with Sage in a safe, proper designed way. And indeed, we're a development center, we can create our own as well. The standard online is more designed to be more out of the box. There is something called an API. If you were really eagle-eyed, you'd have seen that on the circle, but it might be the professional product. If someone's got a particular system that you want to have integrated, that may lead us towards the professional product. The professional product can be on your own server. If you want it on your own server, then that would be the software to look at. We can also put that in Azure. With standard, Azure is part of the subscription. You don't need to think about that. It's just there. It's just included. And as I said earlier, you're kind of even not aware it's there. But with professional product, and if you've got other products, you think, well, actually, I'd like to get other systems, then we can provide an Azure hosting, which is basically renting space on a Microsoft server in that same secure environment where it's all backed up and all secure, but we can do other things as well. That was a good question. That leads on, actually, I can see, actually, I'm looking further down this, backing up. Yes, when we're on Azure, I haven't got time to show it. There is actually a fourth, if you was at the bottom, right at the bottom of my icon, a management portal, which is all about when we want to create a brand new user, you log in there, you just create the new user, you put an email, it sends them a connection, they log in. That's how we set user up. But for the answer to the question, you see your company databases, and against each of those company databases, there's a button that just says backup. You just click backup. Often you don't even need to do that, because what the Azure does, it backs up your full Sage Run system every night, overnight. And in fact, if you click on the restore button, even if you don't want to restore, but the restore shows you all of those backups. It will tell you that they're successful. If you did need to restore, obviously you can from there, but you will see that every night you've got a backup. And some of those are kept, I think it's on I'm going from memory, a weekly and a monthly and a yearly. So there are certain points where those are stored for future as well, rather than just overnight being kept for a certain time. For the workshops we run for our users, it nearly makes me cringe to think of it. I've sent so many workshops talking about making tax digital, but one might take it for granted. I suppose I did really, but yes, fully compliant as of course it would be with Sage, with making tax digital. And the question is about running a VAT return, but I'm not going to run it. Well, I'll show the screen. Revenue and submissions, VAT analysis is where we go. And if I put current VAT return, that's nice and clear. It's a VAT return. Like my report, the values blue in the line, so I know I can click. So for box one, summary box one, we click the value. It shows my bit of an odd setup in this demo data, so I wouldn't be driven by what what somebody set up here, but when we click on the VAT code 1 in this case, which is my standard rate code, then these are the transactions. I could right click, send those to Excel. Many sites we work with, we've got things to do with partial exemption, all sorts of things, and with making tax digital, I know that's not been straightforward for anyone. What we do with Sage 200, if I need to adjust, so box 1 at the back, because if I'm partial exemption or some other agreement I've got with HMRC that I do need to adjust, there are 2 ways actually. The first, well, actually 3, but 2. 1, if I need my adjustment to affect the nominal ledger, then I can do that through a nominal journal, and the nominal journal entry does let me enter things, to also affect the VAT return. So that changes nominal postings as a journal and the VAT return. In this case, I just want to adjust the figure on the VAT return, so I can type a reason for the adjustment, put the value, which is either positive, or I can put a negative value that'll be stored in the history, and we'll just immediately update this figure for my submission. So I've got 2 ways of adjusting. In fact, if I'm a group registration, or in fact there is a third party, there isn't a third party piece, it's a Sage, but it's a separate piece of software that we use for group registrations that will take the VAT return from multiple companies, and that also has an adjustment mechanism as well. Obviously with MTD and where we are nowadays, we want to be more importantly making sure that that's got right. Actually, for the VAT return, show the VAT return, I'm going to analyze it and check it, but I just say produce the VAT return. It will say, have you created your reports? I'm going to say, yeah, I'll have already set up with HMRC. It just shoots it straight, submission goes straight through to filing with HMRC. It couldn't be more straightforward. Mine's not, I know mine's not set well, but when you've completed a VAT return, it then appears on this tab. And if I look at that, mine's shown 0 because it's not actually been run before. As time goes on though, you will be able, you can reopen all of the prior VAT returns. You can still drill down. You can see I've got the things that are all 0 in this case. You can still drill down and see all those values, and we can attach to a completed VAT return. I can then come back and attach documents. So if I did any working, if I've used that adjustment because of my partial exemption, which I've worked out in Excel invariably, I would come back and I would add that Excel sheet against that VAT return. So it's still that's not filing, it's nothing to do with MTD. But one of the things with MTD is about visibility of why we've made adjustments and what that's all about. So they should be attached. So yeah, VAT returns obviously, of course, and definitely compliant with making tax digital. I think I've got to move on to some final bits, but because there's one question which I know if you haven't asked it, I know you want me to answer. There are corrections. Are there corrections you can correct? It's really straightforward. You can never change the accounting that's already taken place in Sage. We have a very robust audit trail. The journal I entered earlier, I can come in, I click correct. I change the journal. I'm talking ahead of the screen coming up. I just change it to how I actually should have entered it. I can either click reverse. When you change it, you can post correction. But what Sage will do, it will enter a reversing journal and repost the correct journal. So there's always an audit trail of changes. You cannot change accounting that's already taken place in Sage 200. If I enter a purchase invoice to the wrong supplier or make something wrong with it, through that transaction inquiry, there is a correct button at the bottom. You can change it to another supplier. It'll automatically enter a credit note in the correct way against the original invoice on that supplier and repost the invoice into the new supplier account. Correction is very easy in Sage 200. Emailing, yes, you can email out. I haven't looked at invoicing, but yeah, you can email invoices, statement, debtor chasing letters, remittances I did mention. And so there are some questions about raising invoices. Invoices can be raised either through invoicing module or sales order processing. I haven't had time to show those. You'll no doubt get a trial. I think you'll find that straightforward enough to work out. And remember that help that you can put to the right. I'm just about in the last minute. Definitely there's a question. Well, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to word it differently. What does it cost? I'm going to say, what would one invest to move up to this level of software? And it is an investment. You're investing in your organization. I know most of us accounts, we see it as accounting software, but that data, providing those reports out, that's helping other people make their decisions. If I get reports out in 2 days rather than 2 weeks, that helps. If they've got their own access to run reports or inquiries, that helps. We're trying to help our organization improve. And my word, for the last 6 months, and how long is it going to go on for the next 6 months? We've got to be keen, because times are going to get tough. There is no doubt. And I'm going to remind us of that Charles Darwin quote earlier, because it really, my word, does that apply? Answer the question, what do we invest? What we've looked at today, Sage 200 Cloud Standard. All of those modules I showed, you get. So you don't choose, I want this one or that one. They're all there. You get 3 concurrent user license immediately. If you don't need 3, but you've got 3. 3 concurrent users means you can set as many users as you want. It will let 3 in at any moment in time. So that's that. You get that by default. Obviously, you can add more users. Different Sage, there are some values, but there's no real top end for standard. If you wanted 300 users, you probably wouldn't be looking at standard. I still call it standard online, the cloud standard product. But I think Sage test bed up to 50. I think there is a limit of 200, but it's a high number. All the modules, 3 users, everything we saw, 395 per month is where we start. 395, that gives you the full support help desk with us as well. That is everything. So yes, we might have more, we might add companies, we might add users, but where do we start? We're all monthly subscription, modules, users and support, 395. There will be some time. Your trial will help you know a lot more if we go on to that. There will be some time from us to help you. We want to help you. We'll talk to you. We'll make sure it's the right software for you. We'll talk about migrating onto it. We'll talk about the setup. You'll have a month of experience with the software already by that point. How many days do you need from us? We only charge for I say days. It's all being delivered online by the hour now, which I think works personally a lot better anyway. So I want 3 hours here, 4 hours there. I'll do something in between, move along. We'll get you to a point where you've got a fully live system. Setup's absolutely key. Anyone who's put them in before will know. So I'm running slightly over time. Setup's key. Get it wrong, reports are going to be a nightmare. Reports are beautiful and easy to use, but the setup of the codes is key. This is just a repeat slide. I was just going to remind you of some things. Azure, vital to know that. We need to know this software fully being backed up for me, totally secure, and it's available from where we work. At home, obviously, at the moment. Software is always up to date. You get the support, but you'll see these slides. I land on my final slide, and sorry, my apologies, we're 2 minutes over. What I will do, I will leave this slide on the screen for a few minutes in case you want to write anything down, because there's an email address there, website and telephone numbers. My apologies for, I would have liked to spend more time with you, but we will reply to all of the questions. So if when this finishes, and you may well think of more questions afterwards, Anne-Marie's email address at the top. We use Anne-Marie's email because Anne-Marie's already been emailing with you for the joining instructions, so you can just pick those up. Anne-Marie will add them, so we won't send out the questions immediately. They're there for us, but what we will send up a follow-up, and then that will tell you how to get those full questions and answers from us. It will tell you how to get a recording of this. I think the most important thing, as you see there, it will include a link where you can then, by responding to us, set up a free 1-month trial. It takes a non-trial, it literally minute. I mean, it's a very easy thing to set up. So you just set yourself a free trial, you get it for a month. Everything I've used today, you can use. We'll send you some different, and yeah, it says at the bottom, I forgot it was there, the Q&As and slides as well. So, and then if there's anything else that you think, oh, I'd like to get something else, again, send that question into Anne-Marie. We love talking to people. Emails is kind of gone to the default communication. It's slightly a shame that we try to get hold of people, but you can pick up the phone. The 0207 number there would be a good number to call. Any questions you've got, want to talk to us. Certainly, if you're setting up the trial, you can drop us an email, but if you're setting the trial, you've got a quick question, call that number. We are going to help you. We like to talk to people. We definitely like to help. Whew. So as I say, I'll leave that slide for a few moments and we'll end the session. Thank you so much for attending. It's flown by for me. I hope you got something from it. I hope you'll enjoy your trial and do get those final questions in so I can reply to those. I'm going to say thank you and goodbye. Thank you.